Alright, we're going to be going over how to assemble a stripped M60 receiver. This is a post-sample machine gun here. I stripped it down. The thing I didn't take off is this rear sight. If you need to know how to install or remove that, I have a video on it. I also left this E4 ammo hanger on here just because it's some nuts and bolts holding it on. But other than that, everything has been removed from this receiver. Also, I guess the pintle bar is still in there as well. Everything else is removed. This is a video kind of geared towards those of you out there that are building these manufacturers, and just a quick down and dirty how to put them together and make them into a functioning weapon. We're going to be using standard M60 parts, so this will be assembled into a standard M60. That's getting it. Alright, if we look at the bottom of the gun here, we can see our sear cut out and our notch in the back where the trigger group is going to install. Look at our trigger group. So let's remove this trigger group retaining spring and pin from the unit. The front of this pins to the bottom of the trunnion here. So we'll take this trigger group, it'll go into the back there, and then we need to line up our pinhole. It's a pretty precision fit. Looks pretty good. We'll put our pin in. Out the other side, then we just want to install our trigger group retaining spring. Front goes on, back slides down over the pin, trigger groups in. No real reason that we install that first, we just do because it's easier to flip this thing around and do what we have to do on the bottom before we get to the other things. Alright, let's install our charging handle. On the other side of this receiver here, we can see this opening. This is where our charging handle installs. If we look at our charging handle, the front of it, we can see these grooves, and that rides in the channel of this receiver. It has to install in the back. So what we'll do is we'll make sure those grooves are in the channel, and we'll just ride that charging handle forward. Next piece we're going to install to hold the charging handle on is the charging handle guide. If we look at the back of our receiver here, it goes in these slots like so. You can see the tabs on it. Once it's in there, we want to install the screw that holds it on. Use a flathead screwdriver. Get it started. Being stubborn. There we go. Was being a little stubborn there, catching a thread. I can see that guide's on there, and we'll just finish threading it on all the way. So the screw's nice and tight. You don't want to over tighten it. You certainly don't want to strip that out. That would be a major problem. So this guide is now installed. Alright, moving on here, let's go ahead and put our barrel latch in. We have the front of our trunnion here. You can see holes on each side, and that is where our barrel latch installs. Barrel latch consists of a couple pieces here. We have our latch itself, roll pin, spring, and then we have our cap. I use this is an E3 cap. It's different. The standard ones use just a metal collar like that, which is what most of them come with. So to install our barrel latch, what we're going to do is we're going to take it and we are going to put it through the top of the trunnion from the right side. make sure it's all the way through. If it's up like this, it's going to be catching right there, and we don't want that. We want it to be seated as far down as possible. We'll take our spring. Our spring goes on the other end of the barrel latch. In this case, like I said, it'd normally be a collar. I use this E3 type cap, and we'll make sure that's lined up with our barrel latch. Looks pretty good. So I'll put our roll pin in. Use a little armorer's hammer. Pin don't want to go. Wasn't lined up right. And you just want to tap that till it's flush. As you can see, it's nice and flush there. And then this is spring loaded. We push in to open, push down to lock. Next thing we're going to install is our carry handle. We have to install this carry handle before we put our handguard on. So that's what we're going to do next. We'll get our pieces out. This is the collar I was talking about. It's just a metal collar. That's what's going to usually hold your barrel latch on. So we have our carry handle. We have our roll pin that's going to hold this collar on. And then we have our detent and spring. These are tiny, get lost very easy. Detent and spring. So the first thing we're going to do to install this is we're going to take our small detent, the stud end, and put it into the spring like that. Once that's done, we look at our trunnion. We can see that there's a hole in the front of it. That hole is for this detent and spring to sit in. So, like so. You can see it's just sitting there. Next, we want to put our carry handle into the socket on the top of the trunnion. And you're going to have to apply some pressure till it comes through. Let's take our collar and we put it through the back, and let's make sure the holes are lined up on it. Once we have the holes lined up, we'll put our roll pin in, and again with our armorer's hammer, just tap that pin flush like so, and then we can hear the clicks. Our detent is holding this carry handle in position. Alright. So moving on here, the next thing we're going to want to install is our handguard. If we look inside our handguard, we can see this is a retaining latch on there that clips into this slot on the bottom of the trunnion. That's what holds it on. We just have to make sure that this pin on the gas tube clears this back shelf here in the handguard. Then once that's done, just hear it click right into place. Make sure our tube was lined up there correctly, and it'll slide right in and lock. That click is this thing that we pointed out latching onto the trunnion. Alright, that's installed. Next thing we'll do is we'll put our barrel assembly on. In order to do this, we want to make sure our barrel latch is up in the open position. Put our barrel in, make sure it's seated nice and flush, then we lock it in place. And that is done. Normally what I like to do is I like to extend the legs on the bipod of this just so the gun's kind of sitting up, and then I can easily work on it. It gives it a nice stable platform. I'm not going to do that for the purposes of this video, just so we can kind of try to capture everything clearly for the camera. Alright, we have our trigger group on, our barrel, our front end. We're looking pretty good there. Let's get our internals installed. Internals, first things first, we have our operating rod assembly. And we have our bolt assembly. First thing we need to do is put this bolt on the operating rod. We have the tower, and inside the bolt there, what you see is that's the firing pin bearing. You want to put the top of the tower, where the grooves are, into the firing pin. so it seats nice and flush on there. Right. Next thing we need to do in order to install this in the gun, we have to rotate this forward. Now there's going to be spring tension on there. It's going to want to pop back. You have to make sure your left lug is facing up, and then once that's forward, just want to put it into the back of our gun. That lug, you can see, is riding on the rails here. And then as we push this forward, we want to make sure our actuator here is facing up, because that's also going to go on top of the rails. Now, when we get in this far, you're going to get some resistance. You have to make sure the safety is off on this gun and hold the trigger down so that the sear drops and it allows this to go forward. So we'll just hold the trigger down, like I said. Just give this a little push on the actuator with your hand and you'll hear it click into the barrel. That was the bolt rotating in the chamber of the barrel. Next thing we have to install here is our drive rod and our drive rod spring. To do that, we take our drive rod and we put it in the back of the spring here, and then what we'll do is we'll feed the spring into the back of the gun and it goes into the back of the operating rod. That's in just like that. And you'll see, you know, it's just kind of sitting in the back here, and that's all right. We'll get to that. Now let's put this buffer and buttstock on. It's what's going to hold everything in place. We have our buffer assembly, and we have our buttstock assembly. If we look inside here, we can see there's a, maybe it's not going to get it. There's a little hole. There's a hole in the back of this buttstock, and that's where the back of this buffer goes in. So all you do is you take your buffer, and you'll just feel it kind of click into that hole there. And that's how it sits. As you can see, it won't fall out. It's in there. Next, we'll take the stud of this buffer, and we'll put it right in the back of this drive rod, and then we'll just slide the buttstock on. You got to make sure you're holding it here. See, there's spring tension on that. It's going to come. We're going to want to come flying off. So just kind of hold it there with your hand. And what you want to do is you want to make sure inside here that buffer is lined up with these two slots that are in the top of the rails. Those slots are for our buffer yoke. Our buffer yoke goes in, it latches onto that buffer, and it holds everything in place. So make sure it's lined up, and there we go. We're all locked in now. You'll know it if this buffer yoke isn't in the correct position, because it just won't go on. Alright, now most of this is done already. Let's move on. Let's get our top cover installed here. We have a standard top cover. It's already complete, put together, and ready to go. What we need next is our top cover return spring. Take our top cover return spring. If we look in the front of our top cover, you can see a little hole there. That's where this stud goes in. So you take the stud, put it in there, push it down, and just kind of make sure the holes are all lined up. And that just sits in there. Next, we'll take our feed tray. Our feed tray is just going to go right on the top of this trunnion. Now, if we look here at the top of the trunnion, we can see there's a hole in the top of that trunnion as well. That's going to be for the other end of that stud to go in. But first, let's just take our feed tray, put it in place. You can see there's a slot next to this right ear. That's for that to sit in, and that'll sit right there. And it's just gonna, you know, make sure the holes are lined up, which they pretty much line themselves up. Next, again, we're going to take this other stud and we're going to put it down, straight down, and make sure it goes into this hole on the top of the trunnion. It's going to be a tight fit. Trying to do this in a manner that the camera gets it. How's that looking? Alright, so the studs are going to go in between. The spring doesn't quite want to line up. Again, our spring doesn't want to line up, so we're going to back this out. I just did a little convincing there. I just used a little screwdriver just to kind of get our spring to line up. Alright. So the spring is in the hole in the top of the trunnion. Next, what we need to move on to is our hinge pin, our top cover hinge pin. We're going to take the female end first. And this is going to go in the right side. So let's turn the gun on its side. Now, look through and let's make sure all our holes are lined up here. And if it looks pretty good, sit it in there, a fiberglass end on a little armor's hammer, and a little tapping. We're not beating on it, we're just tapping it in. And you'll see it sit flush on there. Once it's flush, we want to take our male end here. If you look closely, you can see the female end has come through here. And we'll just take it, push it through, and make sure it clicks fully into place. And then we can see the male end came through the other side, and that is telling us we've successfully installed our hinge pin. And that is it. That's how to completely assemble this gun. The last thing you want to always do is a function check with our top cover up. We'll weapon off safe, rack our bolt to the rear, weapon on safe, pull the trigger holding the charging handle. Seems like we got good action there. Safety up, ride the bolt home on an empty chamber. And then just to close the feed tray, because this is a standard gun, we have to have the bolt back. We'll close our feed tray and ride the bolt home on an empty chamber. And that's it. That is how to completely assemble a standard M60 machine gun.